A struggling artist donated his last $20 to charity, shocked when it led to a life-changing opportunity. The words danced across the faded receipt in Marcus Reed's trembling hands as he stared at the donation confirmation, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his already crumbling life. $20. His last $20. The same 20 that could have been dinner for the next 3 days if he was careful. The evening air bit through his worn jacket as he trudged back to his apartment, each step heavier than the last. The charity collection outside the grocery store hadn't been planned. Nothing about giving away his last bit of money had been planned. But something in the volunteers' eyes, something in the photographs of children affected by the recent hurricane, it had pulled at something deep inside him, a memory perhaps of when someone had once helped him. Winter in Chicago showed no mercy to anyone, least of all a 32-year-old painter whose last commission had been nearly 4 months ago. Marcus shivered, his breath forming small clouds that disappeared too quickly in the darkness. Like his dreams, he thought bitterly. There one moment, gone the next. His apartment, if you could call the cramped studio with its perpetually dripping faucet and temperamental heating an apartment, greeted him with the same emptiness it always did. Canvas upon canvas leaned against the walls, some finished, most abandoned. Fragments of a talent that the world seemed determined to ignore. Marcus slumped onto his threadbare couch, the springs protesting beneath him. The hunger gnawing at his stomach matched the hollowness in his chest. 4 years ago, he'd quit his stable job as a graphic designer to pursue real art. 4 years of dwindling savings, of promising gallery showings that led nowhere, of friends and family whose supportive smiles had slowly transformed into pitying glances. He pulled out his phone, 3% battery remaining, and opened his banking app. The balance stared back at him, $147.22. Rent was due in 10 days, $950. The math was simple and brutal. "You're a goddamn fool, Marcus," he whispered to the empty room. Yet as he set his phone down and walked to the small kitchenette to boil water for the last packet of ramen in his cupboard, he couldn't completely regret his impulsive donation. There was something about giving when you had almost nothing left to give that felt pure point, untainted by the luxury of excess. He ate his meager dinner, staring at his latest painting, a cityscape at dawn, buildings emerging from darkness into the first tentative touches of light. It was good, maybe his best work, but good didn't pay the bills. Sleep came fitfully that night, his dreams punctuated by the faces of disappointed gallery owners and the echoing sound of his mother's voice. "Art is a hobby, Marcus, not a career." Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through his single window and the insistent buzzing of his phone. Marcus groaned, reaching for it blindly. Unknown number. Probably another bill collector. "Hello?" His voice was rough with sleep and resignation. "Is this Marcus Reed?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "Yes. My name is Elena Vega with the Northside Community Foundation. Do you have a moment to talk?" Marcus sat up, confusion furrowing his brow. The ... What? The Northside Community Foundation. You made a donation to our hurricane relief fund yesterday evening. His $20. His last $20. Yes, I remember. I'm sorry, Reed, I'm calling because there was something unusual about your donation. Marcus's heart sank. Had the payment bounced somehow? Was that even possible with cash? The volunteer who collected your donation noted something on your form. He said you mentioned you were an artist while you were talking, and he saw you hesitate before giving the money. He ... Well, he watched you check your wallet afterward, and your expression. It made an impression on him. Marcus closed his eyes, embarrassment washing over him. Great. Now he was a charity case for the charity. "I'm sorry, but why are you calling me about this?" There was a pause, and he could hear pages turning on the other end of the line. "Mr. Reed, our foundation is partly funded by several private donors. One of our most significant benefactors is Eliza Winters." The name hung in the air between them. Marcus's breath caught. Eliza Winters. The Eliza Winters. Collector. Philanthropist. Legend in the Chicago art scene. "I'm familiar with Mrs. Winters." He managed, his voice suddenly dry. "She asks us to keep an eye out for unusual stories, acts of generosity that stand out. When our volunteer reported your donation, giving what appeared to be your last money, she was moved. She's asked if you would be willing to meet with her. Tomorrow afternoon, if possible." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Marcus gripped the edge of his mattress. "Meet with Eliza Winters? Why would she want to meet with me?" "Winters has her own way of doing things, Mr. Reed. I've learned not to question her methods. Are you available tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Outside, snow had begun to fall, delicate flakes swirling past his window. $20. His last $20. Yes, he said, watching the snow. Yes, I'm available. The Winters Gallery stood like a temple of glass and steel in Chicago's Arts District, its 3 stories of exhibition space housing one of the most carefully curated collections in the Midwest. Marcus had been here before, of course. Every aspiring artist in Chicago had, but never through the private entrance at the rear, never as an invited guest. His reflection in the polished doors showed a man trying desperately to look presentable. He'd ironed his one decent shirt, found his least scuffed shoes, and trimmed his beard into something resembling neatness. The portfolio case in his hand contained his 5 best works. Not that he expected to show them. This wasn't that kind of meeting. This was, well, he wasn't entirely sure what this was. The security guard who greeted him had apparently been expecting him, which somehow made the situation even more surreal. Marcus was led through a series of hallways, past artwork worth more than he would likely earn in his lifetime, to a small but elegant office overlooking a winter garden. And there she was, Eliza Winters, 73 years old, silver hair swept into an immaculate chignon, dressed in a simple but obviously expensive charcoal suit. She rose from behind her desk with a grace that belied her age. Mr. Reed, thank you for coming. Her voice was warm, with the faintest trace of a southern accent. Marcus took her extended hand, acutely aware of his calloused palm against her smooth one. Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Winters. Though I'm still not entirely sure why I'm here. She smiled, gesturing to a pair of chairs by the window. Please, sit. Would you like some tea? Coffee? Coffee would be wonderful, thank you. She pressed a small button on a console by her chair, and within moments a young assistant appeared with a tray. The coffee was served in delicate porcelain that Marcus was terrified of breaking. He sipped it carefully, the rich flavor a stark contrast to the instant coffee he'd been rationing at home. You're wondering why I asked to meet you? Eliza said after a moment, her eyes sharp and assessing despite her years, studying him over the rim of her cup. The thought had crossed my mind. Tell me about your donation, Mr. Reed. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. There's not much to tell. I gave $20 to a hurricane relief fund. $20 that, according to our volunteer, appeared to be your last $20. The bluntness of her statement made him wince. I wouldn't say it was my last money, just what I had on me at the time. Mr. Reed. Her tone made it clear she didn't believe him. I've been in the art world for over 50 years. I can recognize a struggling artist when I see one. Your clothes, while clean and presentable, are worn at the cuffs. Your shoes have been polished to hide their age. Your hands show the calluses and paint stains of someone who works constantly. And there's a hunger in your eyes that has nothing to do with food. Marcus set his cup down, suddenly unable to maintain the pretense. Yes, it was my last $20. And yes, I'm struggling. Is that why I'm here? For charity? The sharpness in his tone surprised even him. Eliza's expression didn't change. No, Mr. Reed, you're here because, in my experience, people who give when they have nothing left to give understand something fundamental about life and art that most never grasp. She leaned forward slightly. May I see your portfolio? The abrupt change in direction left him momentarily speechless. He glanced down at the case by his feet. I didn't bring it expecting, but you brought it nonetheless. There was no denying that. With slightly trembling hands, Marcus opened the case and withdrew the carefully protected canvases. 5 paintings, 5 pieces of his soul. Eliza rose and took each one, placing them carefully against the wall beneath the window. She studied them in silence, her expression unreadable. Minutes passed. Marcus found himself holding his breath. Finally, she turned to him. You have talent, Mr. Reed. Raw in places, perhaps too derivative in others, but undeniable talent. Hope flared briefly in his chest before caution tamped it down. He'd heard similar words before, from gallery owners who ultimately passed on his work. Thank you, he said simply, but talent isn't enough. There are thousands of talented artists in this city alone. She returned to her seat, folding her hands in her lap. What interests me is the perspective behind the talent, the soul that guides the hand. Outside, the snow continued to fall, creating a hushed backdrop to their conversation. Mr. Reed, I have a proposition for you. Not charity, but an opportunity, one that will require work, dedication, and that same spirit that led you to give your last $20 to strangers. The Winters Foundation Artist Residency Program had existed for 15 years, yet somehow Marcus had never heard of it. As Eliza explained the details, he understood why. It wasn't advertised. Recipients were chosen personally by Eliza Winters herself, through methods as unconventional as they were mysterious. 3 months of fully funded studio space in the Foundation's building. Materials provided. A stipend for living expenses. Mentorship from established artists. And at the end, a featured spot in the Foundation's annual showcase, an event attended by critics, collectors, and gallery owners from across the country. Why me? Marcus asked when she finished explaining. There must be hundreds of artists more deserving. Eliza's gaze was steady. Deserving is a loaded word, Mr. Reed. I'm not interested in artists who deserve success by some arbitrary standard. I'm interested in artists who have something to say and the courage to say it, even when everything around them suggests they should give up. She stood walking to his cityscape painting, the one he'd stared at while eating his last packet of ramen. This piece, tell me about it. Marcus joined her, looking at his own work with new eyes. It's called First Light. It's about hope, I suppose, finding it in unexpected places. Yes, she said softly. Hope. The same hope that made you give away money you couldn't afford to part with. Her finger traced the air above the canvas, following the line where darkness gave way to dawn. We live in a world that tells artists their work is worthless unless it generates profit. A world that reduces creativity to content, vision to marketability. Yet here you are, still painting, still believing, still giving, even when there's nothing left to give. She turned to face him. That's why you, Mr. Reed. Because somehow, despite everything, you've held on to the thing that matters most. The studio space was larger than his entire apartment. North-facing windows, perfect light, pristine white walls, a floor that didn't creak. Marcus stood in the center of it, portfolio in one hand, duffel bag of personal belongings in the other, certain he was dreaming. The residency program was housed in a converted warehouse in the West Loop. 6 studios, communal kitchen and lounge areas, private living quarters for each artist. It was, as the program director Thomas had explained during the tour, designed to eliminate all practical concerns so that the artists could focus entirely on their work. Marcus set his bag down, moving slowly around the space. 3 months. 3 months to prove himself, to justify Eliza Winters' faith in him. The thought was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. A knock at the open door interrupted his thoughts. A woman stood there, paint-splattered jeans and a loose sweater, dark hair piled messily atop her head. You must be the new resident, she said, stepping into the studio. I'm Sasha, 2nd floor studio, 6 weeks into my residency. Marcus, he shook her extended hand. Just arrived. First day jitters? You look like you're waiting for someone to tell you there's been a mistake and escort you from the building. He laughed, surprised by her directness. That obvious, huh? We all felt it. The Why-Me syndrome. She walked to the windows, looking out at the city. For what it's worth, there's no mistake. Eliza doesn't make them, not with her selections. You know her well? Sasha shrugged. As well as anyone does, I suppose. She visits each of us weekly, talks about our work, sometimes just sits and watches us paint. It's unnerving at first, but you get used to it. Marcus tried to imagine Eliza Winters sitting silently in his studio, observing him work. The thought made his palms sweat. The others are eager to meet you, Sasha continued. We're having dinner together in the common area at 7. Nothing fancy, just takeout and conversation. You should join us. I'd like that. Thank you. After she left, Marcus began unpacking his supplies, arranging brushes and paints with methodical care. The ritual calmed him, grounding him in familiar actions while everything else in his life had suddenly shifted. That evening, he met the other residents. Besides Sasha, there was Kai, a sculptor whose work with reclaimed metals had recently been featured in several prominent galleries. Rachel, whose massive abstract canvases explored themes of climate change. Miguel, a multimedia artist whose installations combined traditional Mexican folk art with digital elements. And David, a photographer documenting the changing urban landscape of American cities. They welcomed him warmly, sharing stories of their own first days, their backgrounds, their artistic journeys. They asked about his work without the competitive edge he'd grown accustomed to in other artistic circles. They listened when he spoke. So how did Eliza find you? David asked as they were finishing their meal. Each of us has a story, usually something unexpected. Marcus hesitated, then told them about his donation, about giving his last $20, about the phone call that followed, As he spoke, he realized how improbable it all sounded, like something from a feel-good movie rather than real life. When he finished, the others exchanged glances. "That tracks," Rachel said with a nod. "Eliza found me volunteering at an arts program in my old neighborhood in the Bronx, teaching kids even though I could barely pay my own rent. She discovered me drawing portraits of homeless people and giving them the originals," Miguel added. "I was living out of my car at the time." One by one, they shared their stories. Different circumstances, different art forms, but a common thread: acts of generosity or perseverance in the face of significant personal hardship. "She looks for the soul first, the art second," Kai said, summing it up. "Her theory is that great art comes from people who understand something essential about humanity, and that understanding usually comes through struggle and how you respond to it." Later, as Marcus settled into his new living quarters, a small but comfortable room with its own bathroom and kitchenette, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: a sense of belonging, of possibility. 3 months. He had 3 months to create a body of work worthy of the opportunity he'd been given. 3 months to prove that his art, like his impulsive donation, had meaning beyond himself. The first few weeks of the residency passed in a blur of activity. Marcus established a routine: early mornings in the studio, afternoons spent exploring the city for inspiration or attending the workshops and master classes offered through the program, evenings of discussion and shared meals with the other residents. His work evolved rapidly in this new environment. Free from the constant anxiety about money, surrounded by peers who challenged and supported him, Marcus found himself taking risks he would never have attempted before. His cityscapes, always his strongest subject, gained new depth and emotional resonance. He experimented with scale, with perspective, with color theory in ways that both terrified and thrilled him. Eliza visited his studio every Wednesday afternoon. Sometimes she would sit silently, watching him work. Other times she would question him intently about his choices, his intentions, his feelings about a particular piece. Occasionally she would tell stories from her decades in the art world, tales of artists who had risen from obscurity to acclaim, often through unlikely circumstances. "Art is not separate from life," she told him during one such visit, studying a large canvas he'd been working on for nearly 2 weeks. "The mistake many artists make is thinking their work happens in isolation from their lived experience." The painting before them was his most ambitious yet, a panoramic view of Chicago at dusk, the transition between day and night captured in layers of color that shifted subtly across the canvas. In the foreground, a solitary figure stood with their back to the viewer, poised between shadow and fading light. "This figure," Eliza said, gesturing. "Tell me about them." Marcus studied his own work. "I'm not entirely sure. They appeared as I was painting, almost unconsciously." "They're you," she said simply, "standing at the threshold between your past and your future, between scarcity and possibility." He looked again and saw that she was right. The figure's posture, the slight tilt of the head, he had indeed painted himself without realizing it. "The best art reveals truths its creator may not fully comprehend," Eliza continued. "That's why technical skill alone is never enough. The hand must be guided by something deeper." As the midpoint of his residency approached, Marcus began preparing for the first of 2 evaluations. Each resident would present their in-progress work to a small panel that included Eliza, the program director, and 2 guest critics. While not officially presented as such, everyone understood that continued participation in the program depended on these evaluations. The night before his presentation, Marcus couldn't sleep. He paced his small room, doubt creeping in with each passing hour. What if they saw through him? What if they realized he didn't belong here, among artists of such caliber? What if the growth he thought he'd experienced was merely an illusion, a temporary reprieve before inevitable failure? A soft knock at his door startled him. It was just past midnight. Sasha stood in the hallway, 2 mugs of tea in her hands. "Thought you might be up. Pre-evaluation jitters?" He accepted the tea gratefully, stepping aside to let her in. "How did you know?" "Because I didn't sleep for 3 days before mine." She sat cross-legged on the single chair in the room, blowing gently on her tea. "Want to talk about it?" "I'm afraid," he admitted. "Afraid they'll regret selecting me. Afraid I've been fooling myself all these years, thinking I had something worth saying through my art." Sasha nodded, unsurprised. "The imposter syndrome special. We've all ordered from that menu. How do you deal with it?" She considered the question, sipping her tea. "I remind myself that doubt is part of the process. that every artist who ever created something meaningful questioned themselves, their work, their worth. And then I get back to work, because ultimately, the work is the only answer to the doubt. They talked until the tea was gone, about art and fear and the strange path that had led them both to this place. When Sasha left, Marcus felt calmer. Not confident exactly, but resigned to facing whatever came next. His evaluation was scheduled for 2 p.m. the following day. At 1:30, as he was making final preparations in his studio, arranging his completed works and organizing his notes, his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Marcus? It's Elena Vega from the Northside Community Foundation. He blinked in surprise. He hadn't spoken to her since that first call about meeting Eliza. Yes, hello. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I wanted to follow up about something, and it's taken me some time to track down the information. What information? About the family you helped with your donation. The $20 you gave to our hurricane relief fund. Marcus sat down, suddenly needing to. I don't understand. Your donation was part of a specific campaign for families displaced by Hurricane Lucia. We've been sending updates to donors about how their contributions have been used. I realized you never received one. The evaluation. He needed to be downstairs in 20 minutes. But something in Elena's voice held him. There was a family, the Morales family, who lost everything in the storm. Parents and 3 children. Your donation, along with others from that day, helped provide emergency housing for them while they waited for FEMA assistance. Marcus closed his eyes, seeing suddenly the photographs that had moved him that day outside the grocery store. Real people, real lives. The youngest child, Sophia, she's 7. She has asthma, and all her medications were lost in the flooding. Part of the funds we raised went toward replacing those medications. Something shifted in Marcus's chest, a tightness releasing, a warmth spreading. I thought you should know, Elena continued. Sometimes when we give, we never see the impact. But your $20, combined with the generosity of others, made a tangible difference for this family. When the call ended, Marcus sat motionless for several minutes. $20. His last $20. A child's medication. A family's temporary shelter. A knock at his studio door broke his reverie. Thomas, the program director. Marcus? The panel is ready for you. The evaluation room was arranged simply. A long table where the panel sat, chairs for other residents who wished to observe, and a large empty wall where artists could display their work. Marcus had arrived with his paintings and his prepared statement, but as he stood before the panel, he found himself setting his notes aside. Before I present my work, he began, I'd like to share something that happened just before I came downstairs. He told them about the phone call, about the Morales family, about 7-year-old Sophia and her asthma medications. As he spoke, he watched Eliza's expression soften almost imperceptibly. I've been thinking a lot about value during my time here, he continued. The value of art, the value of an opportunity like this residency, the value of $20. He gestured to the paintings he'd arranged on the wall. These works explore transitions, moments of change when something ends and something else begins. When I started them, I thought I was painting about my own transition from struggle to opportunity. But I realize now I'm painting about something more universal. He walked to the largest canvas, the cityscape with the solitary figure that Eliza had commented on. This piece is called Threshold. It's about the moment of decision we all face, repeatedly throughout our lives. Do we move forward into uncertainty or retreat into the familiar? Do we give even when it hurts or hold back out of fear? For the next 30 minutes, Marcus guided the panel through his work, explaining his artistic choices, his thematic explorations, the technical challenges he'd set for himself. He answered their questions openly, neither defensive nor apologetic. When it was over, when the panel had thanked him and he had returned to his seat, he felt strangely calm. Whatever their decision, he had spoken his truth. Later that evening, Tomas delivered the panel's feedback to him privately. They were impressed, Marcus, particularly with the evolution they've seen in your work since you arrived. Eliza specifically mentioned your growing confidence and willingness to take risks. Relief washed over him. So I can continue with the program? Absolutely. In fact, Eliza suggested we begin discussing your participation in the showcase exhibition. She believes you're ready to start planning which pieces you'll include. The showcase, the culmination of the residency program, the opportunity to present his work to some of the most influential figures in the art world. There's one more thing, Thomas added. Eliza was moved by your story about the donation and the family it helped. She's asked if you would be interested in creating a special piece for the showcase, something that directly addresses themes of giving and impact. If you agree, she'd like to arrange for the proceeds from its sale to benefit the Hurricane Relief Fund. That night, Marcus began sketching ideas for this new commission. As his pencil moved across the paper, he thought about connections between artist and viewer, between giving and receiving, between small actions and far-reaching consequences. $20. His last $20. A chain of events that had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. The final weeks of the residency were the most intense. As the showcase approached, all the residents worked with focused determination, putting final touches on their selections, preparing artist statements, discussing presentation strategies with the gallery staff. Marcus divided his time between completing his existing body of work and creating the special commission for Eliza. This new piece evolved into something larger and more complex than he'd initially envisioned, a triptych that traced the journey of a single act of kindness as it moved through various lives, creating ripples of change. The left panel depicted the moment of giving, hands extending a small offering. The central panel expanded outward to show the immediate impacts: shelter, medicine, food, comfort. The right panel pulled back further to reveal the long-term transformations. New beginnings, healing, hope restored. He worked on it obsessively, often late into the night after the other residents had retired. Sometimes Sasha would join him, working on her own pieces in companionable silence, or engaging in quiet conversations about art and purpose and the strange past that had led them here. Their friendship had deepened over the months. She had become his closest confidant in the program, the person he turned to when doubt crept in or when he needed honest feedback about his work. There was something more growing between them as well, unspoken but increasingly difficult to ignore. 1 week before the showcase, as they were walking back from a late dinner, Sasha stopped beneath a streetlight, snow falling gently around them. "What will you do after the residency ends?" she asked. It was a question he'd been avoiding. The program provided 2 weeks of transitional housing after the showcase, but beyond that, the future remained uncertain. His old apartment was long gone, the lease having expired during his time at the residency. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Find a new place, I guess. Look for work. Try to build on whatever connections come from the showcase." "I've been thinking," she said, watching the snow gather on his shoulders. "My studio in Pilsen, it's bigger than I need. There's a small room in the back that could work as a second studio space or living space in a pinch." Marcus's heart quickened. "Are you offering to share your studio with me?" "I'm offering more than that if you want it." Her eyes held his, vulnerable but unflinching. "I'm offering a partnership, creative and otherwise." The snow fell between them, each flake catching briefly in the light before continuing its journey downward. A threshold, Marcus thought. Another moment of decision. He reached for her hand, his fingers twining with hers. "I'd like that. Very much." Their first kiss tasted of possibility and the particular sweetness that comes after long hardship, the flavor of unexpected joy. The night of the showcase arrived with all the nervous energy and controlled chaos of any major gallery opening. The converted warehouse had been transformed into an elegant exhibition space, each resident's work presented in its own dedicated area with professional lighting and thoughtfully designed flow between sections. Marcus stood in the center of his display, surveying the final arrangement. 8 paintings, including the triptych commissioned by Eliza, which occupied the most prominent wall. Beside each piece was a small placard with its title and a brief description. Beside the triptych was something additional, a QR code that linked to information about the Hurricane Relief Fund and a way for viewers to donate. "Nervous?" Eliza appeared at his side, resplendent in midnight blue, her silver hair arranged in an elegant updo. "Terrified," he admitted, "but ready, I think." She nodded, studying the triptych. "This is exceptional work, Marcus. You've captured something essential here. The sacred geometry of kindness." "Sacred geometry of kindness," he repeated. "I like that. The collectors will be arriving soon. Remember what we discussed. Be present, be authentic, but don't feel pressured to sell yourself or your work. The art should speak for itself, and the right collectors will hear what it's saying." The showcase opened to invited guests at 7 p.m. sharp. Within an hour, the space was filled with art world luminaries, gallery owners, critics, collectors, and fellow artists. Marcus moved through conversations in a state of heightened awareness, explaining his process when asked, listening more than speaking, watching as people engaged with his work. By 9 p.m., small red dots had appeared beside 6 of his 8 paintings, including the triptych. "Sold," The reality of it was still sinking in when a woman approached him. Elegant, in her 50s perhaps, with kind eyes and a thoughtful expression. "Mr. Reed? I'm Isabella Morales." The name registered immediately. "Morales?" As in, she smiled. "Yes. Family, your donation helped after Hurricane Lucia. Eliza Winters contacted us, told us your story. She arranged for us to be here tonight." Marcus stared at her, momentarily speechless. Behind her stood a man who must be her husband and 3 children, including a small girl who he knew instinctively must be Sophia. "Your painting," Isabella continued, gesturing to the triptych. Eliza explained what inspired it. "I wanted to thank you in person, not just for the donation, but for seeing us, for making our story part of your art." The smallest child, Sophia, stepped forward, offering him a folded piece of paper. "I made this for you," she said shyly. Marcus knelt to accept it, carefully unfolding the drawing, a childish but heartfelt rendering of what appeared to be her family, standing beside a much taller figure that he realized with a start was meant to be him. "My mom said you helped us when we were sad," Sophia explained. "So I drawed you as a giant, 'cause that's how helpers look in my head." Something broke open inside Marcus then. A wall he hadn't even known was there. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at the drawing, at this child, at her family who had endured so much. "Thank you," he managed. "This means more to me than I can say." As the Morales family moved on to view the rest of the exhibition, Sasha appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his. "You okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, still holding Sophia's drawing. "Petilla. Better than okay. I never imagined when I gave that $20 that it would lead to all of this. That's how it works though, isn't it? We never really know the full impact of our actions." She squeezed his hand. "Sometimes we're lucky enough to find out." By the end of the evening, all of Marcus's work had sold. The triptych had gone to a prominent collector who had requested a meeting with him to discuss a possible commission for a series of similar works. 3 gallery owners had expressed interest in representing him. A critic from a major art publication had spent nearly 20 minutes discussing his technique and vision. As the last guest departed and the residents gathered for a private celebration, Eliza approached Marcus with 2 flutes of champagne. "To new beginnings," she said, handing him one. "And to $20 well spent," he replied, clinking his glass against hers. She smiled, her eyes bright with something that might have been pride. "I have a confession to make, Marcus. When I selected you for this program, it wasn't just because of your donation or your obvious talent. No. It was because when I looked at your work, I saw someone who understood something fundamental about light, about how it exists in conversation with darkness. Someone who could see beauty in struggle and possibility in endings." She gestured around the gallery, at his paintings now marked with red dots. I wasn't wrong. Later, as Marcus and Sasha walked back to the residency building, snow once again falling gently around them, he found himself thinking about thresholds, about moments of decision, about the strange, unpredictable geometry of kindness that had brought him here. His life had changed, was still changing, in ways he could never have predicted that evening outside the grocery store. But perhaps the most profound change wasn't in his circumstances, but in his understanding of value, of what it meant to give, of what it meant to receive. $20, his last $20, a beginning disguised as an ending. As they reached the building, Sasha turned to him, brushing snow from his hair. "What are you thinking about? You have that look you get when you're composing a painting in your head." Marcus smiled, pulling her close. "I'm thinking about what comes next, about all the paintings waiting to be made, about the life we might build together." Above them, the night sky had cleared in patches, stars visible between drifting clouds. Another threshold, another beginning. "Whatever comes next," Sasha said, "we'll face it together." And in that moment, standing in the snow with possibilities stretching before him like a blank canvas, Marcus knew that some things, love, art, the courage to give when you have nothing left, were beyond price. Worth more than $20, worth more than everything.